We are still seeing, and many of us experiencing in the workforce, being paid less, per dollar than male counterparts with similar experience, similar training, and similar ability to do what it is that we're hired to do. It's a big question mark. Why is this still a problem? I think that we would have to talk about the many different diverse, individuals and groups of people that we have who still don't have full or feel that they have full equality in the workplace. There are many disadvantaged groups. Open up the numbers, look at the data, and then be prepared to do something about it.
Thanks for tuning in to Keep It Legal, the show where we break down concepts, litigation, and current events with our legal experts. I'm your host, Mark Anik. Joining us today is Stephanie Gaston, a partner at Bradley, Arant, Boult, Cummings in Houston. Stephanie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Stephanie, you do labor and employment law. So for the benefit of the people listening, explain that to me, if you would, please. I know you have two daughters, right? Tell it to me as if one of them said, "Mom, what do you do every day?"
Well, I would be happy to, and I've had plenty of practice doing this because my two daughters actually do ask me in real life, so tell me again, what do you do? So the best way that I like to describe it is I help employers protect their greatest asset, and that's the people that work for them. Human capital is such a treasured resource of any business. And I also love that it gives me great job security because everybody who's going to have a successful business has to figure out how to get it right with your employees. So I help them do that by helping them draft policies, do training on those policies, make revisions when the law changes, as it does often. And then if they do find themselves in trouble, meaning on the other side of the lawsuit, because someone did not feel that they were treated appropriately or fairly, then I help defend employers and businesses in those lawsuits.
In your interaction with your clients, you mentioned most valuable assets. Do you think most corporations view their people as their biggest and most important asset?
That's a great question, Mark. And I will say yes with this caveat. Management knows who's working hard and who's there to collect a paycheck. And the people that are working hard for the good of the business, they really do want to get it right. They want to treat them well. They want to retain that talent. So absolutely, I think that good managers absolutely value employees and people in the highest priority.
Can I do a Stephanie Gaston brag on you for just a moment? One of the reasons, and for our listeners, you just experienced it there. One of the reasons she's here is she occupies this space in the law, but she can explain it so that the rest of us understand it. There was a moment when you were on TV in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and the anchors live on the air said, "I love having Stephanie here. She always explains things so that the rest of us can understand it." And I remember just thinking, no one gets somebody to say something like that live on television. So good for you. You did it again here.
Well, thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. It's very much deserved. I always enjoy looking at a bio, a web bio. So I've gone to yours, even though you and I have worked together. And we're at the third anniversary of the coronavirus pandemic, but it's interesting to me when I go to your bio, in terms of practice areas, it lists labor and employment, which you just articulated. It lists retail. And then the third one is coronavirus disease 2019. Talk about, beyond being a line on your bio, how has COVID changed what you do every day?
I would say I am sure that it has changed what all of us do, or at least how we do what we do. And the biggest change for me has been I have to be able to give practical advice. And that means telling clients, here's what the law says, and then here is my recommendation based on what I know about your business, based on what you're facing and what I imagine is the sentiment of your employees. So the COVID-19 pandemic just created this sense of urgency in understanding this changing world, what laws have been passed to address these changes, and then being able to educate employees about that and then help them make decisions that make sense for their business. I was just on the elevator with one of my partners yesterday, and he and I were just kind of commiserating. One of our meetings had been changed from an in-person meeting to by Zoom. You know, the participants were like, we can more easily do this, and why don't we just not try and get together? And he and I were thinking, oh, but we really were looking forward to getting with clients and having that time to sit down. But that's just one example. Being able to pivot quickly and meet the needs of the client where they are has been one of the biggest changes. So I would say not only what we do has changed, but how we do it. And that's true for the legal profession as well.
How long-standing do you think, and I know I'm asking you a little bit to look into your crystal ball, if you would, but as you point out, there are changes. Are they here for good? Are they temporary, or is there a mix?
I would say for good for as far as I can see. If, you know, I know I'm qualifying that a bit, but I think I need to. And here's what I mean by that. Employees wanting flexibility, remote work opportunities, that is not going away. And I finally have clients who are understanding that. For a while they were, you know, and this is not a criticism, but many of them were, get your butt back in the office. We need to be here. We have a business to run. And now they're saying, we want to attract the best talent. We want to retain the best talent. And that means we have to be flexible in our offerings. So maybe we allow people who have proven to be responsible, responsive, and accountable. Maybe we allow them to work home once or twice a week or whatever works for the business. So that's one change that I think that's going to be here for a while. I also think that this pandemic forced employers to think about making accommodations, not just for people with disabilities, but for people who are associated with others who have disabilities. For example, you know, you have this, population of employees with aging parents, not just young kids. What do we need to be doing for those employees? I think those kinds of policy changes and perspective changes are here to stay.
And do you see those changes you just mentioned, aging parents, and I think so many of us can relate to that. That's an outgrowth of the pandemic itself in terms of how corporations look at those things?
I think absolutely. I think before the pandemic, an employee who was dealing with an aging parent and all the challenges that comes with didn't really feel like they had a platform to go to the employer and say, I need to take my parent to appointments, so I need some time off. Or I need some accommodations in the office so that I'm not exposed to, various illnesses when it's that time of year. I mean, I think it gave employees a platform to know they have these rights, but it also put employers in a position to be more responsive and receptive, where I don't think they were as informed before. So it's not that these are new requirements or obligations on employers, but we have now opened up this conversation where employees can ask for these things, and employers are more willing to have that conversation because they recognize this is my duty and this is a need of my people.
Do you think, you mentioned that in your belief, you think much of those changes are here to stay, but you and I are speaking at a time, and you know this better than I, so please educate me. We're speaking at a time where workers are in great demand, right? Most companies cannot find all of the quality talent that they want to have all of the time. Will companies' views and attitudes towards workers and the flexibility that you just outlined, will that change when the shortage of employees goes away?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. I mean, I think that is a a simple supply and demand kind of issue. Right now, employers don't have the luxury of being more selective because of this issue with people either leaving the workforce, changing their careers. We've all heard that term, the Great Recession, not recession, but the Great Resignation. I have been pleased to be reading more reports that is on the decline. I'm happy to hear that. And I think that as we see less and less people leaving the profession there are many reasons, and experts are tracking all of this, but as we see that start to decline, I do think that some of the employers will have that luxury of being more selective will return. And I don't think it will make for, workforces will go back to being begrudging and offer no benefits. It's not to say that. It's just to say that they won't be bending over backwards because they'll be seeing, more applicants, qualified applicants for the open positions they have.
I want to talk about equal pay. And I want to talk about equal pay because you're a woman in your profession. And I want to talk about equal pay because I happen to be married to a woman who earns money, and I'm raising two young women who will be going into the workforce at some point. Equal Pay Day this year was March 14th. So just a couple of weeks ago. We're recording this on the 28th. Explain to people what Equal Pay Day means every year.
Equal Pay Day is that time of year when a female worker in a position as compared to her male peer will catch up, essentially. I mean, it is the day that commemorates that we are still seeing, and many of us experiencing in the workforce, being paid less, per dollar than male counterparts with similar experience, similar training, and similar ability to do what it is that we're hired to do.
I was interested in the topic, and I knew you and I would be speaking, right? So I went to my computer and I went to Google. We all go to Google. And I entered words about equal pay. And I learned something that because you're a lawyer, but I did not know, that the Equal Pay Act federally was signed into law by one President John Fitzgerald Kennedy in 1963. I wasn't even a year old. We're coming up on the 60th anniversary of this, and you and I are still sitting here saying it's a problem. Why do you think it's still a problem?
It's still relevant. It's still something we are aspiring to correct. And that's it's a big question mark. Why is this still a problem? I mean, I think that we would have to talk about the many different diverse, individuals and groups of people that we have who still don't have full or feel that they have full equality in the workplace. I mean, there are many disadvantaged groups. We just had the Bostock opinion at our Supreme Court that says, protect when our laws that protect people based on sex and gender, well, that includes, sexual orientation and gender identity. That decision is very recent. So that shows you that as a culture and a society, we are changing, and our laws are always behind that. They never keep pace, right? And so we're still talking about this because it's still something as a society that we haven't attained full and equal treatment of women. So that's a personal belief of why we're still dealing with this. But what I will say is, in the past year, I've gone to many different CLEs and conferences, and every single one of them that talked about labor and employment laws had a session on equal pay. And it was different because I had CEOs, executives, leadership level individuals in these meetings with me asking the attorneys putting on these presentations, what do we need to be doing now? I am finally seeing a shift where I won't say everybody and not all clients, but many of them in bigger numbers are embracing this concept that I need to actually do the audit, put on my hat as a leader of this company and open up the numbers, look at the data, and then be prepared to do something about it, depending on what it shows. And so I am really encouraged about this embracing pay audits. I'm encouraged that we now have vendors and companies who are coming in and saying, we can help you with this. We know this is a big undertaking, but we can help you. And then we've got states who are passing laws that say, companies, if you do these audits, we're going to give you some benefits there, some protection if you are sued. So while it is still relevant and it's interesting that we're talking about it 60-something years after the Equal Pay Act was passed, we are making some progress, and that is very encouraging for me to see in the legal profession.
Stephanie, I have to point out, was very kind in that when I said 1963 and President Kennedy, she avoided saying, I wasn't even born yet. Thank you for that. Thank you, and God bless you. You mentioned audits. Let's define that for the people who are listening. What does that mean when a company does an equal pay audit? What are they doing?
Sure. And so I'll point out, there's one thing I want to point out for our listeners who are in any sort of business that does business with the government or has contracts with the government. This is similar to what you already have to do with your affirmative action plans. Okay? And in what I mean by pay audit is taking a roster. You don't have to attach names, but you do want to look at the demographics. You have this roster, you show what people's positions are, how old they are, when you hire them, what they're earning, and then you look to see, are there outliers or do you have bands? You know, ideally, if you have 4 employees and they all have the title, you know, senior director over project accounting or a similar title, they should have similar pay. If there are differences, you need to be able to account for them based on objective factors like the region that they live in, experience, you know, what if there's some particular contribution they make to the company. Otherwise, you should have, you know, bands with very minimal differences there. And so a pay audit, what it essentially has the company do is management decides we're going to do this work, we're going to pull the data, take a look at it, and see where people fall. And again, you do that without names attached to it so that you want to keep it very objective, but you do need other demographics there so that you can take a look and see where are your employees falling.
And in some states, and again, you taught me this, please correct me if I'm incorrect, but in some states with their legislation, if you, the company, have been through this pay audit, that's a defense if somebody comes back later and says, I'm not being paid what I should be paid.
It is, and it's incredible. If you think about it, for those listeners who are familiar with, if we get a complaint that someone was discriminated or harassed on a protected class basis, and we can show that we as a company had a policy that prohibited this, and then when this was reported, we undertook an investigation. Well, that's an affirmative defense. It's the same thing some of these states are doing. They're saying, look, company, if you are going to be responsible enough and have this wherewithal to take the initiative and do the pay audit, we want to give you, you know, a reason to do that. We want to give credit there. And so you can raise this as a defense if you do end up in litigation where an employee claims that they were, you know, discriminated in their pay based on gender or some other protected class basis.
Do you think that perhaps this generation, do you think your daughters and my daughters will work in an environment where they are paid based on the work they perform, merit, the value of what they do, et cetera?
I think, Mark, if things keep trending the way they have been, and by that I mean, you know, employees are being more selective. Employees are deciding, I am not happy with this part of the workforce or this part of my job, so I'm going to ask for a change, and then if I don't get it, I'm leaving. I think that if these kinds of, you know, platforms and priorities, if things continue in this manner, I do think that we're going to see more equal pay for our daughters because they're going to ask for it. And if they don't get it, they're going to decide to work somewhere else. And for companies, that means we have to get more competitive to where we started here, this conversation, to attract and retain the very best talent, because that's our best resource. That's how we stay competitive in the field. That's how we make more money, is if our people are invested, materially invested, and working hard for the good of the company. So I joked with my husband the other day. We took a vacation for spring break, and I thought, man, this vacation has taught me that I am the eternal optimist and you are the pessimist. So I say that to provide some context for perhaps my belief that we are moving in the right direction. And I think we're going to see a change with the generation that's coming behind us.
If I were going to be daring, I would ask about the background of the discussion between you and your spouse, but that's another podcast for another day.
Definitely another podcast.
Definitely. I do like the perspective, though, that yes, the responsibility is on the employer, but employees, you have a vote in this. You, in essence, can vote with your feet. If you don't like it, you can go somewhere else, assuming there is another job somewhere else that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, and I think you have to vote with your voice first. So first give your current employer this opportunity. I have been studying the market, or I recently learned in a conversation that, Mark down the hall is being paid this. We have similar experience. We started the company around the same time. I'd like to understand, how the company made this decision. I think that, and I do think employees are doing that, but just for any listeners who are maybe thinking about this and maybe they think they're in this right now, my suggestion is to raise it first with your employer. But like you said, Mark, I do think that what we're seeing more often lately is if employees don't feel like they've gotten an adequate response, or they don't feel like they're being heard, they are talking with their resignation letter.
Right. You and I are having this discussion in Texas. You're in your office in Houston. We're in our office in Dallas. Texas does not have an equal pay statute, as I understand it. But in doing some reading, California, New York, Massachusetts, you could add to the list, I'm sure, Rhode Island. Given states like California, given New York, given you work with companies that have a national footprint, what do you tell them when it comes to equal pay? What do they do?
I say for employers who are multi-state operators and they have employees across the country, it makes sense to try and make your policies as uniform as reasonably, as we reasonably can. And so what we have been advising, because we have many clients in California, New Jersey, these progressive states that are trying to make things better for employees, and in my opinion, go a little overboard at sometimes, but what we suggest is that you undertake this as a company-wide undertaking. It's better to do it that way because we do expect that this is a trend that Texas may be, later to come. We usually are with regard to things like this. But even so, more and more states are going to start passing this kind of legislation. And we may even have changes at the federal level. And so to be better positioned to, rather than being on the end of just having to respond, we want to be proactive. And so for our clients, I can say for Bradley, we recommend considering when you roll out new policies like this, or you're going to do the pay audit, do it company-wide across your footprint.
You and I are speaking at the conclusion of Women's History Month.
Mm-hmm.
And I want, if I may, for a moment, to talk about your history. You're one of the first in your family to go to school, correct? To go to college and law school.
Exactly. To go to college and definitely law school. I'm the first attorney of the family, and I do love it. I was encouraged. I will say that I had the vote of confidence of my family in pursuing law, and it's worked well. I still have that support, but it is something that it was stepping out and taking a chance because I didn't have anybody in the family to say, "What do you think about this?" or I'm thinking of this, what would you do or what did you do? And so I had to look for those resources and mentorship and answers to those kinds of questions outside the family. Um, and thank goodness I had people around me who could provide that kind of advice and support.
And how did you land on the law? Did you always want to be an attorney?
No, I mean, as in my very young days, I wanted to pursue a career in medicine, and I thought, oh, I'm going to love this. I would be really good at this. And my mom, who was always entirely supportive of me. I mean, she loved me to pieces. I felt every bit of that. But she just said, Stephanie, I really think that your talents and natural abilities would be better suited for a career in law. And so I started doing things, that you would expect debate teams, you know, that kind of arguing and writing persuasive papers. And I just got really into that to see if it was something that I was good at. And then later on, one of my very good friends told me that she was going to go and take the LSAT. And I thought, well, I've been thinking about this, and if I'm going to take it seriously, let me do this too. And so we both did that together. And it just, from there, things just kind of started to work out, and you get these, what I call these signs of affirmation, like you're on the right track and this is what you should be doing. So, not something I always wanted to do, but I caught on pretty early that my natural abilities and skills were well suited for law.
If one of your daughters were to come to you and say, Mom, I'm interested in law school, what would you say?
I know that many of my colleagues are like, no, don't do it, don't do it. But I have to be honest, I like what I do. I think if you find the right subject, the right area of expertise in the law, and the right fit, like law firms aren't for everybody, but there are other things you can do. So I would be in support of it. They have not said that yet, but I would be supportive.
I want to go from that, if I may, to diversity. You are somebody who experiences diversity yourself. You are African American. I want to read some more of your accolades, if I may, from your bio. Named top 50 women lawyers by the Texas Diversity Council. Named a top 50 women lawyers by the National Diversity Council, both in 2017 and 2019. Diversity matters, right? Broad statement.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mentioned that you and I are in Texas before, and most recently, there was a story that came out of the governor's office in which the governor was advising corporations to, actually, he was advising state entities to steer clear of DEI initiatives. I do not, with a capital do not, want to pull you into a political debate at whatsoever. But I do want to ask this question. When you have a headline such as that, and it involves somebody like the governor of a state, do you get calls from your clients saying, what do we do now?
I get the question. So even if that's not the reason for the call, it's going to come up on the call. And I find it counterproductive because you have companies who are trying to move forward, keep up with being competitive, and part of that is embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so when you have leaders come out and say, that is not a priority, and in fact, it should not be, and I don't want you to do that, it is very counterproductive. And while there are going to be some clients who say, I'm going to do this anyway, this is important to us, and it's the right thing to do, you're going to have others who respond and say, well, maybe this shouldn't be a priority, or we shouldn't be investing resources and funding there. So when I heard that, I mean, I don't have a problem saying that was discouraging to me. I mean, in what I do, labor and employment, this is what we do on a daily basis. We counsel our clients on how to be more inclusive and have equitable policies, not just for minorities, but for all of your employees. I mean, diversity means you want people from different economic backgrounds, ethnicity backgrounds, religions, ages. Even age is a diverse factor. I mean, So I think diverse teams are better teams. You get better results. And I would go so far as to say there's so much science behind this that this conversation, I don't get tired of having it, but I do get tired of proving why we should be having it.
Interesting. Do you think companies understand that? Do they understand, hey, if I've got an African American woman, a white guy, an older gentleman, a younger person, if I have gay, straight, et cetera, around the table, I have diversity, I have different perspectives. This makes our work better. This makes us better able to turn around and properly service clients who also have diverse people in their workforces. Do most companies get that innately?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, it's an interesting, and I'll tell you why. The answer is no until they have an interrupter, something that interrupts this usual way that they approach things. Because we as humans, we like to be around people who talk like us, look like us, we fit in, and so we naturally are attracted to others who are like us. And so even in running a business, I may be hiring people who look like me and talk like me or go to the same church or our kids are on the same teams. And there's nothing wrong with that. But until companies, management specifically, have an interrupter, and an example of an interrupter, what I mean by that is when they have an applicant who says, I don't think I got a fair shake because I'm other than, or they have a client who says, I want to hire you, but I don't see anybody on your website who looks like me. Those kinds of interrupters then force management to look at it differently and see this benefit. But I don't think it comes naturally, but I don't think that is unique. I think a lot of us, if we think about it, we have these natural inclinations to be around people that are like us because we feel more accepted and we feel more belong. Like there's this sense of belonging. But building out that belonging so that you are reaching beyond what's comfortable or usual, or typical for you, I think that's where you get this value. And those are the leaders that take their organizations to the next level.
In many ways there, you're talking about human behavior more than you are corporate behavior, right?
Yeah, because human behavior, it's part of the way we do our jobs and the way we lead. So you can't ignore that step. But like I said, once people have those interrupters, it changes the corporate behavior because now I'm aware of this thing I've been doing or this information I was unaware of, and I allow it to inform my decisions and the way I lead going forward.
Okay. Well, I always love chatting with you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us this afternoon.
Well, thank you. I always love chatting with you as well. You have been a great partnership for me and in my journey, and so I enjoy it. I enjoy talking with you.
Thank you, Stephanie Gaston with Bradley, Arant, Boult, Cummings in Houston. Bradley is a national law firm with a reputation for skilled legal work, exceptional client service, and impeccable integrity. Bradley provides business clients around the world with a full suite of legal services in dozens of industries and practice areas, with 10 offices located in Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, North Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and the District of Columbia. You can visit Bradley.com for more information about the firm. Make sure to like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and tune in next time to Keep It Legal. I'm your host, Mark Anik. We'll see you then.